Have you ever played a game that was so good that you started ignoring your personal responsibilities so that you could play it more? Well, that game for me is Path of Exile. But let's rewind it back to the beginning, because we started off with a problem. So anybody that's played Path of Exile will know that you start off on the beach, and after you get to the end of the beach and kill Hillock, you get a level up. You click the little plus at the bottom of the screen, and boom, intimidation, fear, and a sense of dread all begin to take over your soul. Time after time, I would get to the end of the beach and open up the passive skill tree and say, you know what? It's too much. I don't feel like getting invested in such a ridiculously complex game. Fast forward to December 2022. The Forbidden Sanctum League is released, and I decided this time is going to be different. I'm going to play until I at least beat the campaign and see where it takes me. Yes, the game got more complex than just the passive skill tree. Yes, I was intimidated by all of the different systems, but then I had a realization. You don't need to know everything about the game to get far, and to have a build that still has a decent amount of complexity. A build that can beat the bosses, a build that can map efficiently. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What is a map? What constitutes beating the campaign? You could technically say that you're already mapping in a way. Path of Exile is composed of instance maps, and what you're going to be doing the entire time at a fundamental level is moving from map to map to map. What really differentiates the campaign from the end game is that the maps that you're doing are linear, right? You are going through the same progression of instance maps every time while you're doing the campaign. In the end game, you get maps as an item that you can place into the map device, and then that opens up 6 portals to the map that you can then go run to get loot, go back to your base, put another map in the portal device, go to the map, boom, 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 boom. So that is the foundation that was laid that the developers then started to build upon to make the gameplay more interactive and give you an immense amount of choice in what you want to do and how you want to play. And this is why I say that you don't need to understand everything about Path of Exile to have a phenomenal time playing the game. You can pick a league mechanic that you think looks fun, and you can go balls deep into that league mechanic and master it. So before I talk about how this foundation is built upon, I need to describe what a league mechanic is. Every 12 or 13 weeks, Path of Exile will have a new league. And with each new league is a new league mechanic. These league mechanics are things like a tower defense game, or a mirror that they place on the map that you can walk through to spawn a bunch of specter-like creatures all over the map. If a league mechanic gets good feedback, then they'll often add it to the core game, so that going forward, when new leagues are released, you can continue to play that league mechanic and make it your main staple if that's what you'd like to do. So what I'm really getting at is that you can pick 1 or 2 league mechanics per league, and you can dive into those league mechanics and go as deep as you would like to go. And honestly, most league mechanics are rewarding enough that they can give you everything that you would need to make a pretty strong character, because they don't necessarily change the types of gear that you're getting or anything like that. Rather, they give you a different way to chase different items. Yes, there are some unique items that are tied to specific league mechanics and things like that. So okay, what about all this turned me into a degenerate? What I think is beautiful about this system is that you have the way that your character plays. You put skill gems into your gear and that gives you an ability, right? And then you can begin to craft a play style that you enjoy by looking at different builds and trying to piece things together and make something that's unique to what you enjoy doing. You can then try all of the league mechanics and see, oh, I really like this one. And then you can take that core character that you've constructed over time and you can explore that league mechanic until your heart's content. And when you're bored of that one, you can go to the next one. And it's almost like there's so many different mini games within Path of Exile in this mapping system that you can never really get that bored of it. I mean, sure, I play other games, but like, I'm always coming back home. So one of my favorite mechanics is Harvest. And let me use this as an example to kind of elaborate on how exactly this works. So I put a map into my portal device, and then I go into the map, and say it's just a map of a dungeon, just for the sake of an example. While I'm going throughout the dungeon, I might run into a harvest. There is a chance for a harvest to spawn. It essentially looks like a big plant. So I click on the plant and I go into the harvest. Within the harvest, there are several different little crop sections. There's blue, yellow, and red. So you'll then go around to each section, say the red, and you'll click on a little device that's in there, and it'll harvest those crops. All those crops turn into monsters, you kill them, and it drops the juice. You pick the juice up, you go back out to your map, you finish the map, you leave it, then you put another map in your portal device, and you go again. I can then take the juice that I got from the harvest and do one of two things with it. The first thing that you can do with your juice is you can sell it to other players. You see how much it's going for, you get a big stack of it, and you go, here, I'll give you this much juice for this much currency. You go you meet up with the player, you go do the trade, you're done. And this is just a general thing in Path of Exile. You take that currency and you look up a piece of gear that you want that another player is selling, and then you can buy that piece of gear from them. Alternatively, you can put that juice essentially into the crafting bench, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can edit a piece of gear. For example, you can change a fire modifier into a lightning modifier and a bunch of different things like that. I mean, there's like 150 different crafts that you can do, probably even more. So the benefit of this is that if I have a build that capitalizes on a certain stat, I can use the harvest crafting bench to target farm that stat. So the way that you can customize what you want to do and how you want to play is where a lot of the complexity of Path of Exile comes into play. And this is the same with the skill tree. There are different classes in Path of Exile through ascendancies, but they all use that same passive skill tree. And really, the big difference between the classes is where you start on the skill tree. Marauder is down here in the bottom left, and then you have more magic classes on the right. And you can work your way around the tree and kind of just see where the nodes will take you, or, oh, this node is kind of close to where I start. Maybe I want to go for that first. And then you're kind of exploring, and you can keyword search and it'll highlight. So if you say like fire damage, it'll highlight all of the nodes that will give you fire damage, right? And that, like, you don't have to memorize or even understand every single node. You can kind of just learn as you go, or kind of reverse engineer it, where you see a node that sounds cool and you're like, what ability would work well with that? Each skill has tags on the tooltip. So it'll say like fire slam, right? So you know that this ability will scale with fire damage, and it'll scale with things that affect slams. And then as gear drops in your maps, you're just looking at the gear, seeing the stats that's on it, and you're like, this gives me 100% extra fire damage. My skill is a fire slam. That sounds like it would be good, and I equip it. But I want to touch on the league mechanic thing just a little bit more, because, and I'm sorry, there's kind of two of those big skill trees. The good news is you can't really fuck the second skill tree up that bad. And this is your Atlas skill tree. By the time you're really playing and investing into this skill tree, it's relatively easy to get enough currency to reset it. And in the last league, they actually added where you can have multiple Atlas skill trees. So if you're in the mood to do this, you can do that. If you're in the mood to do that, you can do this. So they've kind of given some leniency there, which was an excellent piece of quality of life that they added to the game. What's amazing about the Atlas skill tree is that, similar to how we were typing in fire damage or slam with our character skill tree, you can type in your favorite mechanic and it'll highlight all the nodes. Alternatively, you can find a node that's, say, a harvest node, since we're using that as our example, and when you click on the little harvest picture in the center of that node, it'll highlight all the other harvest ones on the skill tree. So just like how we were connecting the dots on the character skill tree, we're just doing the same thing with the Atlas skill tree, though there's a lot less pressure on messing up, because you're just trying to pick whatever you think sounds fun, and that's really it. You don't have to worry about having the most optimized Atlas skill tree, because even if you were only depending on the items that dropped on the ground while you're running maps, you can still make a pretty strong character as long as you start to learn what your build is looking for. Yes, just like every other game, there is a meta. There are 4 or 5 skills every league that will outcompete the other ones, and if you pick those and follow a build guide, you will probably have an easier time working your way not only through the campaign, but through the mapping system. But I also want to add, there's not really a point to following the meta. You're not competing against anybody else, and really, the true satisfaction, at least in my opinion, comes from trying to create something that's unique, create something that I can say, this is my build, this is how far I was able to get with it. And then the next league comes around and you get a little bit farther, and then you get a little bit farther, and you continue to get better and better. And on the way, you're learning about different league mechanics, and you kind of have this endless cycle of being able to learn more about the systems in the game, learn more about the way that the game is programmed. How do you do offense? How do you scale it? How do you do defense? How do you scale it? But say you wanted a build where you just run around super fast and you click one button. You can find a way to do that. Say you like more MMO style rotation gameplay. You can find a way to do that. If you like melee, you can do it. If you like poison, you can do it. Bows, big slams, all of it. You can think of an archetype in your head and truly go for it. And not only can you go for that archetype, you feel the progression of the build getting stronger, and it is so satisfying. Visual feedback is increasing, your speed is increasing, you're starting to one-shot things, you're eating massive hits as you learn how to scale your defense, and you're taking on bosses that you never even would have been able to approach before. It's a game that truly makes you feel like you've accomplished something when you invest into learning about a build and chasing the items that you find that would make it stronger. You start scouring the wiki for different uniques, and you find something that sounds really, really cool. You start playing around in the skill tree and finding things that would scale with that unique item. Over time, you gather gear that would complement that unique item and exacerbate how good it is. And it might even be a unique item that everybody says is shit, but you found a way to twist that into something that could really work for your playstyle. The build community online is absolutely massive. There are always people online that are willing to discuss a build with you in different subreddits and different discords and on YouTube or in the game itself. You can find someone to talk about your build or say, my defense is scaled really well, but I'm having trouble getting more damage out of this build. Can somebody give me a tip? And there's always somebody that will reach out and say, maybe you should try this, or maybe you should buy this unique item or chase this item, or have you thought about this stat? Or, oh, you should look at this passive node on the skill tree. And not only is there an excellent community of players in the game, the developers are some of the best developers I've ever seen. Personally, this is important to me. It just feels good to play a game where you know it's made by people that really care. They want to make the best ARPG possible. They're transparent. They tell you why they're changing things, when they're changing things, and how they're changing it. They'll give you the equation. If you want to go that deep, you can crunch the numbers yourself. They give you the tools to do that. They give you the power to do that. Are they perfect? No. Do they make changes a little slower than they should sometimes? Sure. But at the end of the day, the Path of Exile community understands that they are developers that really want to take the game in a healthy direction. One of the things about Diablo 4 that I can't really vibe with is when they sit down to do their campfire chats, they don't really seem like they're being genuine with the audience. It still feels suit and tie to me. Which is kind of funny, right? Because that's exactly what they're not supposed to be. They're supposed to be candid. I don't feel like that with the Path of Exile developers at all. I feel like they really would just sit down across the table from you and have a conversation. Just a regular conversation. And you could just talk about ARPGs with these guys and it would be just like talking to a friend. And that's such a rare thing. And it's so far and few between that you see developers like that nowadays with a lot of these AAA cash grab studios that are just dumping games out way ahead of their release date, way before they were ready or complete, and the games end up feeling like they don't have a soul. And Path of Exile, it feels like it has a soul. Thank you for watching, everybody. Leave a comment down below. Do you play Path of Exile? Have you ever tried and quit the game? What's your favorite game? What are some of the things that you look for in a game that really helps you call that game home? All right, guys, that's it from me. Later.